So watch what you say, watch what you do, because it ain't going to be deleted. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. It is Virtual Presentation Friday. This is February 12th. I'm really excited about today. For those of you that are new to joining, I host these every week. Which is a lot of work, but I am willing to do it because it keeps us connected and going. And look at all these amazing people that get to connect and network and hear some amazing information in regards to COVID and this pandemic. We've all been struggling and being isolated. And I think this topic is going to be very fitting for all of us to hear from Brittany Stout. And just a reminder, you are muted and you're going to be muted throughout this presentation. There will be plenty of time for questions and comments after, and we'll just kind of go from there. So again, thank you all for being here, and more announcements following this call as well. So without further ado, we have Brittany Stout, who is our speaker today, our virtual keynote speaker today, and she's with Spring Hills Communities. And she will be speaking to us with a very enlightening topic, effects of isolation in seniors. I will now mute myself.
Thank you so much. I am beyond excited for this topic. Obviously, it's a heavy hitter for what we're dealing with right now during the pandemic. And I fear our seniors are taking the brunt of it. So my name again is Brittany Stout. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness with Spring Hills Senior Communities. So we have anywhere from home care all the way up to memory care, post-acutes, and the like. My background is in exercise physiology. So exercise is medicine in my book. And there are a lot of natural, easy solutions that we can do during this time to be healthier and be happier. And especially when we see it in ourselves, we lead by example, and we can then gear that towards our seniors, which is the most important part. So thank you guys so much for joining. My background with my exercise physiologist degree is actually working on exercise and nutrition protocols for cancer patients and survivors. I then moved on to the senior sphere because there are a lot of them dealing with cancer and so many more comorbidities. So we really need to turn a heavy focus again on just easy things that we can do and be aware of, and to turn our attention to who really needs it, which is our geriatric population. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started on this heavy topic. All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. So again, we are going to be talking about how isolation, which is necessary for what we're going through, has its effects and outcomes on our seniors who are in that very susceptible category for getting poor outcomes with that exposure. So it actually affects a lot more than we might think. We might have seen it already, being almost a year into the pandemic. This isolation is affecting physical health. It's affecting our immune health, and we'll kind of see how that is portraying itself, and in easy solutions, again, that we can take to move this progress forward. Mental health, that's been a big one. I saw that from almost day one. Literally almost a year ago, we started seeing that decline in mental health due to more so the social isolation than anything. And where do we go from here? What can we do for ourselves, our loved ones, our residents, our clients? What can we do to make this journey easier for them and bring back what they once had? So starting with physical health, I am an exercise physiologist, so I've got to start here. Unfortunately, we do have a natural muscle wasting process as we age. It's called sarcopenia. And that's just something that it's that wear and tear that happens as we age, but more rapidly, we see that happen after age 70, which is typically a lot of the times the age group and above that we're working with. And if we have made those New Year's resolutions to go to the gym, we understand that it takes a long time to build up those gains, as we say, that progress, those goals. Physiologically, it takes 12 weeks to gain that muscle mass and aerobic capacity on more of that muscle memory basis. So you don't have to work so hard, and you start to see those benefits really taking hold at 12 weeks. Flip side, once we get out of the gym, it goes quickly. And again, we see that process happen. It takes anywhere from 7 to 14 days to start to lose that progress, whether it be on an exercise regimen or through a therapy episode, which a lot of times helps puts our seniors on the right path again. And then 7 days later, if they don't do anything after discharge, we're back to square one. So they work very hard to get to a good, independent, safe level. And it only takes them a matter of weeks to lose those gains. That's important even before we isolate them. But now we are isolating them. A lot of times if you're in an assisted living, for example, that living space is a lot smaller than a ranch style home or an apartment or a house. So they don't have as many places to go, unfortunately, but the isolation is necessary because they are very vulnerable and susceptible. So this is promoting more sedentary behavior. We already have that natural muscle wasting that we spoke on earlier, but sedentary behavior, sitting longer, is going to increase the speed of that decline and thus reducing that bone density. There's no stimulation to the bone with no movement, no activity, no exercise. So the bones then will also weaken. And we know that lack of lower extremity strength is a big reason why our seniors fall in the first place. Not only that, their muscles are weaker, but they haven't gotten exposure to a lot of different surfaces, different terrains, remembering what it feels like to walk on carpet versus concrete, concrete versus grass. Our body needs to be engaged with this, the proprioception of the body, just understanding how it should behave. That builds the confidence and reduces a chance of falling or becoming unsteady. Same with different obstacles. A kid running past you in the grocery store. Our seniors aren't getting exposed to that anymore. So those quick reactions. Steps. You can't always avoid steps, unfortunately. So if you were somebody that was actively taking them, then you're isolated to a room and that exposure is not there, becomes that much more of a risk when we do open back up and get out and about more. And the one thing we want to do is keep our seniors away from big groups of people and the possibility of exposure. I think of right away hospitals. If our seniors are declining mentally, physically, nutritionally even, they could experience a fall. That likelihood actually goes up with sedentary behavior due to isolation. So it might be inevitable that an injury happens and your resident is going out to the hospital. Then they're there for a little while with potentially increased exposure. So when they come back to the assisted living or a residential living facility, they've got to quarantine again. And there's no rehab, there's no comeback from it. So then it kind of turns into a bad cycle of outcomes that weren't even related to COVID in the first place. So these are these odds and ends things that we typically don't think about because we know we're keeping our seniors safe by isolating them. Keeping going, so I am a research-based person. I'm not the type of person you can tell the sky is blue without actually seeing research in the subject. So I like to pull from research that's out there because it's factual. So this was actually an early review that I looked at when the pandemic began in March, April of last year. So early review out of the University of Virginia School of Medicine was strongly supporting through research the possibility that exercise can prevent the severity of something called acute respiratory distress syndrome. And this is a major cause of death in patients that do get exposure to that coronavirus. And it affects between 3 and 17% of all of the COVID-19 patients. The one thing we want to prevent more than anything else is dying from this virus. That's why we're taking such extremes right now to isolate our seniors and reduce that exposure, because that would be the worst case scenario, the worst possible outcome. So just knowing that exercise can help break up the very reason why your lungs are feeling heavy, your breath is short. It's the mucus buildup. And just exercising, even deep breathing practices in through the nose, out through the mouth, is increasing the ability of the lungs to function properly, if not a little bit better than have been. This coronavirus is affecting the lungs. So we want to do what we can to increase their potential, which is through exercise, making those lungs work a little bit harder by breathing heavier, and I'll also help get the circulation going with that airflow in the lungs just through deep breathing practices. Some more studies here. This was a newer review from the Journal of Medicine on the therapeutic effects of exercise on COVID prevention. So flipping the script from one severity to the other side of prevention, looking at how exercise can relieve those late stage poor outcomes. Just regular exercise, and I don't oftentimes like to say exercise because it seems too structured. The body needs movement. That's what it needs. Even dancing, and I'm like, just move in your chair. It's safe, and you're just moving your limbs and your joints. And you're having fun. Peter's going for it right now, getting himself healthy. Don't leave me, come back. Just a little bit of movement there, and it can significantly improve the immune system ability of the body to reduce the incidence of infectious disease. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid here. And all of you guys, by the way, can do some seated marches in your chair and start that process of getting even more healthy in your chairs at any age. But on top of reducing that risk of infection, which is exactly what we want to avoid, flip side, high intensity exercise and lack of exercise actually reduce the ability of the immune system. The immune system declines with either too high of exercise. I don't know if that's on the geriatrics list of concerns, but more so lack of exercise is actually declining our response from the immune system. And again, looking at moderate intensity exercise, again, just a nice easy walk, an easy dance in your chair can reduce the incidence, duration, and severity of upper respiratory tract, predominantly viral infections. Again, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. And you can have that prevention through some moderate exercise. It's always that motivation piece that we tend to miss, but just some easy movement is all we need. What's the solution? Easy movement. The other thing is there's so many virtual solutions right now. Not all of our geriatrics can handle or tolerate or even learn a virtual solution at this time. But let's make sure the ones that can do know the resources that are available. I know I myself do a free group class. They don't even have to spend any money. Come hang out with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. And we have so much fun doing a virtual, safe group exercise class. They get the social interaction. They smile, they laugh, similar to how Micah does his presentations here. I mean, it is so much fun to be with people again, even if it's virtual. So we can have that easy, safe movement. Just make sure you're giving your folks the resources that they need in your community. Encouragement of continued safe tasks, things that they can do with no issues or risk of falls or injury. I always say, and stretching too is always, that always feels good, right? A little morning stretch, a big deep breath, helping the joints, helping your lungs, and it feels really good. Sit to stands. I always tell my seniors that I work with, they call me the drill sergeant, but I say, every time you go from a seated to a standing position, to go to the bathroom, to get a drink of water, to go get some food, you're doing a sit to stand action. That is something that you do not ever want to not be able to do. That's an activity of daily living. You want to be able to do this and do it strong. So every time you go to stand up, sit down and do another one. Double it up. Then you're doing double the amount of sit to stands in a day-to-day basis, increasing your lower extremity strengthening, which is going to reduce your fall risk. And you're also being able to continue that movement and have movement to prevent poor outcomes with COVID exposure. And then seated movement, that's where just move in your seat, just dance in your seat. I don't care what you do, just keep moving. We also offer in-person exercise sessions, not just we at Spring Hills. There's a lot of resources out there allowing in-person structured exercise. Therapists do this a lot. I know us as exercise physiologists do this a lot. In full PPE, we look like we're hazmat suiting out here to get some exercise into our senior community because of the importance of it. That's why we're essential, because that's how exercise is. It's essential. And the risk of them falling might actually be more detrimental than that risk of exposure with somebody in full PPE doing what's best for the resident. So make sure they have the resources there, and they just need to keep moving. Moving on to immune health. So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because we are made of bacteria and viruses. They actually outnumber our human cells 10 to 1. Granted, they're very small, but we are made of them. And our bodies build immunity based on exposure to different bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Most of them are actually not harmful to us. A smaller percentage are. Remember the flu? The flu and COVID, those are more harmful for us, but there's a lot that are actually very good for us. Our microbiome, our gut, we're talking about the good gut bacteria. So we need this bacteria and this exposure. I always say, think of a baby, right? A newborn baby. It is mandatory that they get exposure to both the vaginal and anal bacteria and viruses of the mother at birth. Especially, that's why the vaginal birth is a lot more protective, a lot more beneficial, they say. I'm not an OBGYN, but this is what the research tells me. But that's that exposure to something that's going to be safe for the baby, because it's coming directly from the mother, and that starts to build that baby's immunity. And from 0 to 2, that's why you don't want to keep your child in a bubble. The boy in the plastic bubble is not a great idea, because we need that exposure, especially from ages 0 to 2. That's why they're always sick. They're building the immunity, remembering what's harmful and taking in what's beneficial. That's important. So with a fully sanitized everything, even again, just a room that they're in, fully sanitized, it's kind of like the immune system's taking a vacation. Doesn't have to be ready or responsive to anything. There's nothing there. That's the beauty of the boost in the immune system when you are exposing yourself to different viruses and bacteria, because your immune system stays on high alert. It's ready. It's ready to go and to fight because it's used to it. You got invaders coming from all over the place. It's used to fighting those off. When everything's completely sanitized, then they're on vacation. They're taking a break. So imagine when restrictions lift again, more so than they have now. And because it's going to be more so after the rollout of the vaccine, and our seniors get more exposed to the outside world, their immune system is still on vacation. It's not going to be as easy to be on the defense to anything that they have missed throughout this isolation period. Now, that's the good thing about the vaccine. It does give the immune system its boost. Like, hey, be ready. Let's turn on. Let's get ready. There's something out there. Let's get to work. That's why it's a good thing. But if you think about, research is still coming out with the vaccine right now. And if you look at the flu vaccine, again, remember the flu? The flu vaccine actually only gave people, I believe it was about a 14% risk reduction. They didn't stop washing their hands because they got the flu shot. They didn't stop sneezing into their arm because they got the flu shot. They didn't stop exercising or eating healthy because they got the flu shot. That was an extra level of protection for them. So that's why this vaccine is not the end all be all, because we're still wearing masks and we're still social distancing, because it's anything like the flu vaccine, which is an mRNA vaccine. So a little bit different in what we're going to see from those results long term. But if we compare it to what we already have, it's only going to give a small amount of that protection. So it's not going to be the end all be all. We still have to eat right. We still have to exercise, and we still have to wash our hands and be cautious and respectful of other people's space, or else we'd be able to go mask free right now. So just keep that in mind as those vaccines are rolling out. Also with exercise and different things that we'll talk about here in the next couple slides, they will help that extra percent to give you that full risk reduction that we're looking for. Here's one of my favorite topics, vitamin D. So when we isolate, we spend less time outside. So I'm actually out of Ohio, and it is freezing cold and snowy here. And I haven't seen the sun in weeks. So that being said, winter can cause a reduction of vitamin D. But this happened last year, March. We had a whole amount of sunshine through summertime that was lacking for our seniors being isolated. Us even, we were told to not even go outside. So that's reduction from sunlight, and it's reduction from fresh air. What does the lung feed off of? Oxygen. What's the freshest type you're going to get? Outside. But first I want to talk about the vitamin D, because it's very, very, very interesting what we're finding out right now in terms of immune system benefits with vitamin D. So sunlight promotes, when we're outside and we get direct access to sunlight, it promotes vitamin D production in the body. The sun rays do not have vitamin D in them. They connect and communicate with cells on the surfaces of our skin to create for the body to create its own vitamin D. So it's kind of a stimulant there. But that's a good stimulant to have because it's a vitamin that is deficient in 70% of the US elderly population. And this was, I put this presentation together a couple months ago. So that actually might be increased at this point, but it's already a deficient vitamin in our elderly population. So we'll talk about the bone benefits, but that's not even where I want to begin. The immune system benefits of vitamin D are mind-blowing. Mind-blowing, Peter, mind-blowing. Vitamin D is an immunomodulator, meaning that if the immune system is not active enough, vitamin D can push it up, boost it up, give it a little bit more energy. Flip side, if the immune system is overreactive, such as in autoimmune diseases, actually there, if you see the bullet down a little further, there actually is a correlation between deficiency of vitamin D and increased autoimmune diseases. We see that a lot with the reduction in vitamin D because there's nothing to balance that out. Your body's overactive, it's fighting against itself. So vitamin D can actually tone down that activity so the body doesn't attack itself on such a regular basis. As well as that, it gives us an increase, or it reduces the susceptibility of infection, which again, we're looking towards that inevitability. We want to reduce that possibility, reduce that risk. As for bone health, it does play a role in bone health because it helps with the resorption and homeostasis of calcium. So just making sure the bones have enough, the body has enough calcium to be absorbed and to come into play in terms of building bone density. You need vitamin D to absorb that calcium. So if you do not have adequate levels of circulating vitamin D, you will not be able to absorb adequate levels of calcium. So it's a really important connection there too. You want to make sure you have that amount of vitamin D to support the bones, because if you're sedentary, you're not having resistance to support the bones. So we got to make sure we're having some of those nutrients there to offset that. They actually did a study recently with kind of poorer outcomes with COVID. They were in the emergency room and they were teetering on the edge of going into the ICU. So a group of doctors out of New York took a control group out of that group that was potentially going to the ICU and said, all right, let's have half the group not take any vitamin D supplementation, and let's have a variable group that does take vitamin D supplementation, and let's just see what happens. Because, it's not really, you're not going to hit that higher tolerance. They dosed it appropriately, and it's a natural vitamin that we need. So it was a overall safe intervention. And they found with the group that was taking the vitamin D, none of them went to the ICU. None of them went to the ICU. The control group, however, a handful of them did go, a majority of them did go to the ICU, and 2 of them had passed away. So it was a pretty incredible study just with a natural thing, right? Vitamin D is a natural thing. We can go outside and get an appropriate amount of it. And it's something our body needs. Deficiency back in the day for children that were deficient in vitamin D, they suffered from rickets. They actually put this group of babies, they were crawling, they weren't walking, but they put babies in front of 3 food groups, one of them being cod liver oil, yummy, has a high level of vitamin D. And the researchers let the babies loose and say, all right, let's see which ones they gravitate towards. They all looked the same, but they would try different ones. They would smell it, taste it, and they would try the 3 different options. Every single baby in that group with a deficiency in vitamin D went for the cod liver oil because of its vitamin D potential. So the body, when it gives us, if you're craving sweets, if you're craving salty, if you're craving vegetables, it's usually your body telling you that you are in need of something. Now, if you crave hamburgers from McDonald's all the time, that just means they got you hooked with their flavors that are artificially designed to make you want more of these things. So you got suckered into it is what happened. But if you're like, I remember I was craving spinach so bad one time, I wanted to eat just the whole thing out of the box. I'm like, this is very strange. This is very strange. But I must have been deficient in a heavy nutrient within spinach, because research shows that the body will make that response happen to try to entice you that it needs more of that nutrient. Other thing, back in the day, tuberculosis, before we had antibiotics and different things that we would utilize for tuberculosis, they actually used to cure tuberculosis. One of their interventions was vitamin D. Before we got the man-made antibiotics and medicines and things like that, they cured them with cod liver oil, vitamin D. It's just amazing how far we've gotten from natural substances overall. But other than that, it's so vital in the immune system, and it's cheap and inexpensive. So I was telling Micah, that's why that's not advertised, because nobody makes any money out of it. So keep that in mind with your residents. They're already likely deficient in vitamin D, and seeing now its impact on the immune system, I mean, it's just a really easy, natural, risk-free way to really boost their immune system. Flip side, oxygen. That's the other really beneficial thing we get out of outside exposure. Indoor stagnant air is no bueno, no good. It gives us oxygen, but the real stuff is outside. That deep breath outside. Research actually shows that just spending 5 minutes outside has immediate boosts to the immune system, immediate boost. They test it using a couple blood panel tests and different things depending on the research you're looking at. But they believe it to be linked to a substance that plants create called phytoncides that kind of increase the potential and levels of the white blood cells that are circulating, which are a big immune response. Our white blood cells play a big immune response in the body. So the immediate benefits are shown literally with just 5 minutes of being outside. Now, if you only spend 5 minutes outside and then go back inside, those benefits can leave as quickly as they came. So that's why you want a little bit more exposure as many times as you can get outside, especially with a lot of trees around, has direct benefits to the immune system. So, and that's an easy thing, right? Easy, cheap, inexpensive, and healthy. So we've got to kind of promote that more. It also gets us that exposure to the different terrains, right? Grass, rocks, mud, different things like that, which will ultimately give us more confidence to be able to handle that. Solutions all day. 5-minute walk outside. I'd rather be outside walking with somebody than inside walking with somebody if we're talking about risk of exposure, right? So you might as well just go outside. And bonus, if you're around a lot of trees and there's some sunshine, you just checked off a bunch of different boxes, bunch of different categories there. You can also, if you're not able to get that sunlight exposure, and maybe you can't, it's not in your regimen to get enough vitamin D through food sources, because there's a few that do have vitamin D within that, but as we get into residential living facilities and we don't cook for ourselves as much, it's actually a lot harder to get those food groups in. So adding some of those vitamin D rich food with immune boosting foods is gonna be that special concoction that we need to both prevent and boost as well. So we find those in citrus fruits. Obviously that's that heavy vitamin C. So a little tidbit on vitamin C, it doesn't do much when you're already sick. It's more of a preventative measure that we use with vitamin C. But once we're infected and we're not feeling well, then we want to turn to our antioxidants or our phytonutrients. I call them phytonutrients. And those are going to be found in our colorful fruits and veggies. So red bell peppers, yes, color does make a deal here, a big deal here with the red bell peppers. It's going to be the best for antioxidant potential. Broccoli, garlic, spinach, yogurt, wild caught fish. So being careful of those mercury levels. Cheese, and then egg yolks. So egg yolks are really good. They have choline, which is good for memory, good cholesterol, healthy fats, vitamin D. So it's got a lot in there, but we don't want to overdo it. Everything in moderation is my favorite quote. So maybe like 1, maybe 2 eggs a day, maybe 2, but definitely 1. Is with the yolk. It has a lot of really good health benefits that extend beyond just boosting the immune system. So when COVID, here's my little tangent here. So stop me if you've heard it before. I have done a lot of nutrients with, or research with nutrients that directly benefit coronavirus or viral infections that target the lungs. So I say, which food groups do I hit that specific category? So I'm sure everybody's heard of this. It's called propolis. The bee wax, it's a substance that bees create. So if you're allergic to bees, probably not the best option, but it's just a throat spray, very cheap. And propolis is a nutrient that is actually directly correlated to reducing viral infections targeted at the lungs. Again, the very thing we are trying to avoid. So propolis has been studied in the coronavirus family. But of course, with this COVID-19, it's a new strain of that family. But I mean, you can have your loose egg in the family, but you're still a family. There are similarities there. So it makes me feel better that there are benefits with the other members of the coronavirus family, that hopefully there will also be some benefits with this strain of the coronavirus family in terms of lung protection against viruses. Really cheap, like $5. I go through this like Be Naturals, and real cheap. You can just order it online. Direct benefits to the lung. The other thing I was looking up is the mushroom family. Medicinal mushrooms have such heavy support for the immune system because they're similar to vitamin D with their immunomodulation potential. So again, if the immune system's underactive, it'll boost it up. If it's overactive, it'll rein it in a little bit. So that being said, turkey tail mushroom powder sounds so fun. It's actually because the mushroom looks like a turkey tail in its natural environment. That's why it's called that. Biggest immune boosting benefits out of the mushroom family that you can find, because it brings the immune system to its level that is going to give you the most benefits and protection. So very, very important stuff. So if you are not able to get your vitamin D through sunlight, maybe the food groups that contain vitamin D aren't really something you have direct access to. Supplementation is important. So if you are working out of an assisted living or a home care or really any level, make sure they're talking to their primary care provider about them actually supplementing with this, because you just never know somebody's health journey. So always getting that permission from their primary care provider, physician, anybody that has a hand in their care, because you just never know. Even though these are well studied and have a low side effect potential, you just never know what it could be reacting with. So probiotics are really important because that is the good bacteria that we have. We actually do want to keep that level high, and we want to keep our good gut bacteria strong. And it's also, our gut is where most of our nutrients are pulled and absorbed. So if you don't have the bacteria to be able to help absorb some of these nutrients at the appropriate spot along the GI tract, then you're not really giving the body the tools it needs to both prevent and attack anything that comes its way that's not supposed to be there. Also, the vitamin D3 is the most bioavailable, so the body responds to it most effectively. And then always just adding in, not always, but you can just add in the calcium at that point to make sure you have that absorption of the two, just for that increase in bone strength. If your calcium levels are also low, or your bone density is also low. If your bone density is low, I actually really like the collagen as an option for bone density. But either way, some options there for if food or sunlight, those natural resources aren't available to you or to your loved ones or residents. So last but not least, the mental health. So a lot of what I took just now is, with these next couple of slides, happened before COVID, before quarantine. These were stats before we isolated, and they are very scary. So I just pulled a couple stats, a couple research quotes here. Tons of evidence, and we see it every day, that social isolation and loneliness, which significantly impacts and affects our seniors, but it increases the risk of them dying sooner. We want to protect their lifespan. That's why we're quarantining them. We don't want them to die because of the coronavirus. But they're basically saying that loneliness and social isolation is going to increase that inevitability. We've got to have an eye on the social aspect of it, the mental health aspect of it, or we're not going to have an end user, COVID or not. And it takes height over many of our leading risk factors. It's correlated with smoking as much as 15 cigarettes a day or drinking alcohol. We do those things to be healthier. But if we're lonely and isolated, might as well just be doing that, according to the research. And it's twice as harmful as the physical and mental and physical health as obesity. That, to me, is one of our leading drivers of a lot of our other health diseases and long-term issues that we have. And it's saying mental health is going to affect that a little bit more. Loneliness, social isolation, depression is going to affect that almost just as much as those leading killers. It is a very, very heavy topic that does not get enough attention, in my opinion. So a couple more stats here, very, very surprising here. More than 2 million of the 34 million Americans aged 65 and older suffer from some form of depression. This was before COVID. I'm actually a little bit scared to look at the research now. I see it, I've seen the decline, and it was already bad. So it just hurts my heart. So it's more important that I almost scare my coworkers into being like, listen, you have to go in there and talk to them. You have to provide solutions for them because they have a 59% higher risk of physical and mental decline. Again, we're seeing it. The rate of depression in residential care facilities, our own facilities, as high as 44%. And seniors suffer from loneliness, have a 64% higher risk of dementia. That's what we want to avoid. And we're creating that experience for them. So it is so important to find the solution. So number one, with mental health, if your seniors don't know how to use any virtual apparatus, teach them if they can be taught. Because that learning something new is actually a huge benefit for the brain to reduce cognitive decline. So teach them if they don't know how to use technology. That's going to give them some social interaction and they're going to learn something new. So we can do anything virtual. We do deep breathing classes virtual, for crying out loud. We do guided meditation. We do exercise classes. We do mental health drop-ins. Like if you need to talk to me, call me. I'll be over there. That's that level of relationship that is built and should be built if you're working with the geriatric population. Music stimulation. That's going to take them back to a time that they remember and that they like. Not everybody likes the times that we're living in currently, unfortunately. But music takes you back to a time, right? We had fun and we remember, and it just brings back all these feelings of nostalgia. And if you got some music, you can get your seated movement in, double the bonus. Positive affirmation and gratefulness. Research actually shows that just saying one positive thought a day or one thought of gratitude a day, writing it down, speaking it out loud, intentionally thinking about it, literally rewires the brain chemistry to think more positively. One thought a day. And it's hard to find stuff that we're grateful for nowadays sometimes. I'm grateful for my dog. See, I said it today. So I'm already doing things to push myself in a method for being more healthy. And then, of course, exercising and eating healthy. These have direct benefits. There's a gut-brain axis. What you eat directly affects how you feel, what you think, what your mood is, you name it. There is a direct relationship. So making sure we're eating healthy. Healthy fats are really good for the brain. There's a difference between our saturated unhealthy fats, and our healthy fats. So making sure we get some of those fatty acids in there, the omega-3s that they talk about, DHA, EPA, all that good stuff. Walnuts, so the food that you eat directly benefit, what it looks like actually does directly benefit that organ. A walnut, when it pops out of its shell, literally looks like a brain. It even has 2 hemispheres. It's wild because it's actually a healthy fat and it does promote brain health. And then blueberries, any berry is going to be a good antioxidant, good for the immune system. Blueberries, I call them brain berries because they're really good for that circulation. They have the resveratrol, that's good in the red wine, but stay away from those if you're worried about your balance. But good for circulation and good for the brain. And then of course, just take out what's bad for you. Processed food, alcohol, smoking, the stuff that we already know, right? The biggest thing is just finding a solution and making sure that we're doing it naturally and not with a medication per se. Like if we can have a natural option over a medication, we don't have to worry about the side effects. And also, a lot of times our seniors don't understand that most medications are not supposed to be used long-term. But that's also something that kind of goes by the wayside. It's a quick fix because you're supposed to turn around and change your lifestyle to be better and healthier to get off of that medication. So that's why I like to do the food first, supplement an already healthy diet, and then what we can't supplement or get through a healthy diet or lifestyle, that's when the medication conversation comes in. That is really all I have, aside from other things that we can do for some socialization and things like that, our virtual programs, preparing our seniors, promoting movement, going outside with them, talking to them, mental health activities, paying attention to residents for changes in mood, physical levels, conditions, and promoting a safe environment so people just open up about their feelings and how this pandemic has forced them to adjust. And that's all I got. That's me. That's my stuff. If you guys have any questions, I'm a naturopath. I like functional medicine, and I know some weird things about how you can benefit using bees and mushrooms. So I'll stop my share screen and take it over to you, Micah, and we'll open up for questions.
Awesome. This was an amazing presentation and a lot of questions in the chat for sure, especially pronunciation and spelling of some of the terms you shared, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce them. But one of the ones that was asked, and then I saw that I have 2 people that raised their hands, so I'm going to come to you in just a minute. But one of the ones was, where is it? It was a P word.
Propolis?
I think that's the one, yes. Yeah, Profilix. How did you spell that? A few people were asking.
I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect.
P-O-L-I-S.
Oh, okay.
Propolis.
Okay, and then another question was, are there potential drug-to-drug interactions with these supplements?
That's a really good question. That they're actually all natural. So for me, I always say talk to your doctor no matter what, because you just never know what sort of medications they're on and if there are any contraindications with those medicines. But these are all natural substance with little to no side effects. Actually, usually no side effects because it's just a natural substance. Like I said, there's a disclaimer with the propolis because it is a bee substrate. So there might be an allergy issue with that. So I say anything new, no matter what, just take to your physician just to double check and verify. You can never be too safe about that. These are all natural substances, so they should not have any drug-to-drug interaction.
Okay, and then where did the isolation stats come from?
Usually, this was a couple months ago, but usually I just go to the government site, like a cdc.gov or some sort of .gov where we get actual statistics from the government. I'd have to go back to my references for this, but I can always email that to you.
Okay, and just let everybody know, there will be a thank you email following this with her contact info, so any questions that are not answered right now, feel free to reach out to her afterwards. So I know that we had 2 hands up. Lisa Youngers, your hand is still up. I'm going to remove your hand now, and you may unmute yourself. Go ahead, Lisa, you're unmuted.
Oh, I just think I didn't have a question. I was just doing a comment.
Okay.
But great information, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Wileen, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. You had your hand up earlier with a question. I asked to unmute you. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay, until you're ready, you're welcome to join in on a question. Did anybody else have any other questions? Because this was really, really phenomenal information. It was very enlightening, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance. Go ahead, Wileen.
Okay, I'm here.
Yes, you had a question?
Yes, I just want to say thank you. We had a lot of great information here. And I had a question about the medication for your lungs.
Yeah, so it's not a medication. There's no, it's just all stuff you can buy from Thrive Market, Whole Foods Unlimited, or Whole Foods Market, Health Foods Unlimited. These are just all natural products. So no medication or prescription is needed for that. And it's actually a throat spray. So it's
how do you spell this throat spray? How do you spell that?
PRO.
Okay.
POLIS, and I did.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed it, and I got a lot of great information.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you.
All natural things. So, because I'm not a doctor or physician, as much as I wish I would have spent that time going to school. I can only promote natural things. So anything else, though, it's always good to just take through with your doctor, natural or not.
Okay, thank you.
I see you, Pamela. Go ahead, Pamela. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't find the hand. Thanks.
No, you're good. I saw you.
Thank you. My question's about the exposure aspect, where we need some exposure, but and our bodies respond to that. I think that's kind of conflicting sometimes. I think it could be kind of dangerous. In other words, one of my neighbors early on used that argument about exposure and that our bodies need exposure to say why people didn't need to mask. So can you, and I guess I'm a healthcare professional background too, so used to sterile technique and things like that, where it's not dangerous to keep the environment clean. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can elaborate for sure. So that's really just how we keep the immune system alert. It doesn't mean go out and play in mud by any means. So there's definitely a disclaimer that needs to be made with that. You also don't want, like a hospital setting, to not be sterile. So the biggest thing is just making sure that you have your immune system on high alert. So if you don't want to do that exposure because of the risk of it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, and allowing ourselves to actually go out protectively, because you can go out and expose yourself and still wear a mask just by touch. Your skin cells, your sensory system can pick up a lot of odds and ends things that will help just make sure the immune system is awake and active. But you can also boost the immune system through eating foods and exercising. That will do just that, to keep your immune system on high alert. So they not necessarily need to go out and do that exposure, especially a very sensitive, vulnerable population. But perhaps you and I, especially if we've already had exposure, we have that innate immunity. As we start to get the vaccine, it lets us know that we're a little bit more on that safe side, just a little bit. We still want to always do all these areas of protection, but just understanding that that's how we build and keep the immune system on high alert. But it's not the only option that we have, because there's good bacteria and viruses. I don't want to say necessarily good, but they're not harmful. And then there's that handful that are. So we don't really want to roll the dice on that, especially if we're vulnerable or highly susceptible. So there's other options we can take for that. But it is important to know how your immune system communicates, builds, and responds. And that's why we still want to be able to get to a point where we can go out into that exposure again on the safe side and just be prepared for that. But great question. I'm happy to elaborate on that for sure.
And then real quick, for those of you that are possibly having to get off, if your name is acronymed or shortened, please tell me what it is. Otherwise, I will not be able to add you to the thank you email. So please make sure if it's shortened or abbreviated, I need to have that actual name so you get the credits that you deserve. And then Reverend Stanley, I see your hand is raised. I'm lowering it. You are asked to unmute. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. The question I have for you has to do with oxygen levels and oxygen and trying to repair. My whole team almost died because of COVID. We were on the front lines. Last year, we served over 8,500 isolated seniors. And one of the things is I wanted to know, like right now, my levels go up and down. I've done the zinc, the D, vitamin D. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, yet we are still having after effects that are very serious as far as our breathing. And I don't know. And of course, I also have people I'm visiting on a regular basis that I give food and supplies and things to. They're having the same issue. And, they've been given these pearls and all this other stuff, but we want to know, how do we restore our lungs? How do we get back that capacity to be able to breathe again and function and move around? What can we do besides taking walks and doing other things? And of course, they're very isolated inside of their apartments or their nursing homes, isolated however they are. How do they do that? How is the best way to do that?
That is a fantastic question. So they actually say, especially with the fluctuations in the oxygen levels, you really don't want to do too much exercise. So that one thing that will help stimulate the lungs, actually you got to be very careful with it. Like a little walk would be good, but to where? Especially if you're isolated and you're still dealing with these issues of fatigue, the residual effects of COVID. I have a lot of coworkers myself that are dealing with these late stage residual effects of COVID, and it has to do with that lung capacity. So deep breathing practices, I don't know if that's been on your regimen yet or not, but deep breathing practices in through the nose, out through the mouth, they actually have seven different exercises that you can do to help restore our lung functionings. Anywhere from a forceful inhale to puttering your exhales, to holding the top breath and holding the low breath. So there's 7 different techniques that you can engage in based off of what's easiest for you and the diversity of the lungs working its muscle. So it's more so that automatic movement of the lungs and the diaphragm. So that spatial is going to come from that activity. If you can get that light activity, some yoga, some chest opening yoga stretches too will allow more of those deep breaths and that capacity, and just a lower moderate intensity exercise movement for you to allow that detoxification. I would probably dabble in that propolis research a little bit, just to be more, aware of that. I know it's protective, but it might have some regenerative, restorative outcomes as well. I've also been doing some research with vitamin A. There's been a correlation between vitamin A and lung health, but not really a causation until recently. So they are linking vitamin A consumption, just making sure you're at the appropriate levels, keeping in mind the recommended daily allowance for a lot of our vitamins and minerals are the level you want to get to not be deficient. So you want to figure out where you need to be as an individual for a lot of your vitamins and minerals, but vitamin A has been linked along with D, and then you said you were taking the zinc and things like that. There is also research that is linking the effects of cyanide poisoning and the effects that cyanide poisoning has with the lung structure and culture. So they're doing a lot of the like the cyanide poisoning kit or like residual effects of that. Some of that research in terms of treatments along that same level has been affected. There's also been something called ozone therapy. So it's a reactive, unstable oxygen. Usually our oxygen is O2. This is a reactive O3. So if you don't want to breathe it in, it's got to be something that's transmitted either through shot, or they have other routes to get that oxygen, but it kind of shocks the body. It's a shock therapy for the body, and that's been really good to reset a lot of the body functions. We don't really practice it, unfortunately, as much in the United States. It should be practiced because, again, it's one of those things that's inexpensive. And research is really new in that area, but that's really helped in a lot of the countries that have started using ozone therapy, O3. So those are a few treatment options that I might send your way. I don't know the details of that. So in terms of what you would do on your end is doing a little bit of your research, asking around to your providers if any of that is going to make a difference for you specifically, but those are a few odds and ends things that I have heard that have been, number one, really good for the treatment of COVID in general. And then more importantly than that, the restorative factor of the lungs, because they can be restored, which is the great part. But it might also be a time sensitive issue as well, because we're just not sure how long those effects of COVID might last and what the average might look like as well. But I would dive into those couple suggestions and see if any of those routes might boost that potential for you.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate, your expertise and what you've done. Just one more thing about coughing as well. I had these really bad coughing fits, and it's a part of this whole process. And I literally lose my breath and everything. And I've got this exhaler thing I have to use to these balls, and it's all this crazy stuff. I walk about 0.8 miles every single day. But I noticed that no matter what I do, at certain times, the oxygen level just goes down. And it's like if I start out with a high oxygen level, then by the end of the day, I'm good. But if I start at a low oxygen level, like if I start below 91, like at 88 or 85, by the time that the time comes at nighttime, afternoon, I have no energy whatsoever. I have headaches. I have all kinds of things going on. So that's why I'm trying to figure out now, how do I restore? Because I'm a musician. I sing. I'm a gospel singer. I do acting. I'm very active. And so I know how to breathe. I've taught people how to breathe. I've done stuff in the nursing homes and facilities of how to breathe. But now myself, I'm struggling to be able to breathe myself. And that's why I'm trying to get as much information as I can so I can not only help myself, but help all the others as well.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that one of those options will do the trick for you, because I know that's just coughing alone can be draining. And it's just something that you want to get rid of. So again, it might actually be time sensitive. I hope that's not the case. I hope you can implement a practice or an intervention that really does help restore that function. And I would be interested to follow up with you if you've had any.
Please do. I'm going to friend you on Facebook and keep touch with me, because we're all over the place. And I really am very impressed with you. I thank God for you that you came on to really share this, because Micah is amazing. I love Micah. He's one of my heroes. And he's always about trying to do things for others. And that's why he's such a blessing and so blessed. Yeah. But if I can do anything to help you, my organization, we can work together, do anything, I would love to, because we've been doing what we've been doing for 20 years. And we touch thousands and thousands of people's lives. Our elderly are our population. And we really, really put our heart and soul into everything we do. So thank you so much for your time, and God bless you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Well, thank you so much for those words. Oh my gosh, they touched me. Thank you so much. I've been so happy to be here. And thank you, Micah, for putting all this together for us.
Of course. Well, for the interest of time, if you have further information or requests, I know some people were asking about your mushroom powder, where you get it, where are the 7 techniques of breathing. If you all would like the presentation, I highly recommend, when my thank you email goes out, reach out to Brittany. She'll be ready to take on any way she can connect with you, help you grow your services, help with your wellness. She'd be happy to help you with all of that. So Brittany, thank you so much. So I'm going to stop recording.